So Sean McKenna here, back with Paul Munroe, XYZ. One of the things I want to throw at you, I could be wrong on this, so if I'm wrong, make me right. But were you in a band after XYZ that might have had Mitch Perry in it?
Yes.
Okay, so I did have that right. And I'll tell you why I asked. 1990, Mitch Perry was playing with Cher. And she played here where I am in Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is, you look at the east coast of Canada, and we're about as far east as you can go. And I remember reading that in Metal Edge or something, and I brought it up. And I remember the story because I since talked to Mitch a few months ago, and he said that you guys didn't get to play a whole heck of a lot, but some of the stuff that you did was like super fun, and he had wished that it had actually seen the light of day. Talk about that project a little bit.
Yeah. So Mitch and Sean McNabb, they came to the Palace to see XYZ play, and they, were hoping that they could hook up with me and get them to play with them because I guess they were losing their drummer. Well, I guess it was towards the end of our run and everything, and I was looking for other projects, so I decided to meet with them. So Mitch Perry and then Sean McNabb and Ralph Saines, Michael Starr from Steel Panther, right?
Yeah.
But he was Ralph back in the day, and he was doing the Van Halen thing too. So Ralph was an amazing front man. Had the hair, had the looks. The girls loved him. Everybody looked good. Everybody was young. Everybody had the long hair. The songs were really good. If you look up 7% Solution at the Whiskey, you'll see some good footage. There's probably about 4 or 5 tunes posted, and the band was it was an all-star band. It really was like the best guys from the area at that time. And the songs were just written really, really well. And it was like this all-star band, but it was a bad time. Timing is everything. And the window of opportunity closed on us before we even started. Even XYZ kind of slipped through the window right at the last minute. But it was just not a bad time. Grunge and rap were coming in. It was a whole different kind of music era. So, although the band had all the potential to do great things, we just never got a shot at it.
Well, and I'm glad I had that piece of information right, because I did go back and I couldn't find as much info, which is something that I remembered. The first 2 XYZ albums, now for me, I listened to them a lot. I had a singer that I used to play with that he loved music and he would go get everything. And I remember him having those first 2 albums. The first album, Don Dokken produced it, correct?
Right.
And safe to say, it's a little bit of a Dokken-ish feel. You've probably heard that before. Yeah. What was it like working with him?
Don, I really liked Don. He taught me a lot as a drummer to make a story, basically with your bass drum. You have to have patterns. Your bass drum can't just be all over the place throughout the song, even if it grooves. You have to have a beginning, a middle, and an ending. And sometimes a repetitive pattern before it changes a little bit and then goes to the chorus or something else, which it made a lot of sense to me. So from a drumming standpoint, he gave me a lot of ideas and then let me run with it. And we got along really, really well. He pulled me out of pre-production one day to do a movie with Tommy Chong called Far Out Man. And so we met Tommy and hung out with them, and that was a lot of fun hanging out with Don. He was always had beautiful women around him, always, so that was always fun to watch.
Absolutely. In those first 2 albums, if I was to describe it, obviously I said chops and different types of chops, and I think we're going on in that time. And maybe it was a bit of a throwback to what was going on maybe 10 years previous. I don't know what it was about. I'm a hair metal guy. I grew up in that genre. I love that music. But it just seemed like some of the guys were just kind of doing impressions of Peter Criss in a different way or Joey Kramer in a different way. And the 2 guys that I thought that were doing things quite a bit different were yourself, and the other one was Dave Alford from Rough Cut, who kind of reminded me a little bit of Vinny Appice in his approach.
Right.
Who were some of the guys maybe back then that you would have said, hey, I really like what he's doing, and you maybe would have sort of chopped or copped one or 2 things that they were laying down?
Well, definitely Ted McKenna. I mean, some of his fills ended up on the album.
And I love that reference because you know what, Paul?
Hmm.
He's a guy who's absolutely fantastic.
Hmm.
Had the fortune or misfortune, I don't know what you call it, of playing with one of the most iconic guitar players that ever lived. So maybe his
Right.
work kind of gets overshadowed a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, probably. And same with like Alex Van Halen, is
Oh,
influenced by him too. And if you listen to some of his little nuances, it's not easy to play his stuff and to capture his feel. It's like a John Bonham type of thing. It's like, yeah, you can play the beats, but why doesn't it sound like John? Because he's got that special magic, and Alex and Ted. So these are the guys that, really Vinny Appice was another one. Hear a lot of, I think I hear a lot of his playing in my style on some of those albums. Um, who else? Tommy Aldridge.
mm.
I liked a lot of what he was doing, but Simon Phillips. He was just such a huge influence on me, and I think I just captured a lot from a lot of guys. It's not, I can't take credit for everything that I did because I was influenced by so many great drummers. And I kind of took a little bit from everybody, it sounds like what everyone else is doing too. I wasn't the first one to come up with that. I'll just borrow a little here and there and make it my own. And that's what I did. I just kind of made it my own thing. But yeah, there's definitely some heavy influences by those guys I mentioned in there.
I love that you mentioned Alex Van Halen because, in my opinion, he's probably, I mean, everybody knows he can play, but I won't say underrated so much as maybe underappreciated.
Yeah.
Him and Michael Anthony back in the day, it's pretty darn hard to do one of those double shuffle, boogie kick drum sort of things,
Right.
and not sound like Van Halen or in particular Alex Van Halen, right?
Right, right. No, he was unique, and even some of his ride cymbal, you don't hear that tang 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 tang.
Yeah.
He's like tang ta ta tang ta tang 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 ta ta tang tang ta ta tang tang ta ta. He's very syncopated. He
Yeah.
does a lot of like crazy stuff, but you really have to listen. You have to listen to really hear that stuff. And then, yeah, when you go to learn a song and try to play it, then you start hearing it like, whoa, this is not as, he just makes it sound easy, but his fills are very spaced out. You don't get that dega 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 dega. You don't get that generic,
Right.
beginner drum fill. You're going to get some really thought out musical, tasty fills that have a lot of space and a lot of musicality to it. And he makes it sound easy, which is why he might have got overshadowed by Eddie. People didn't really see what he had, but a drummer like me, I could really appreciate that. I'm sure you can too. He's just phenomenal.
Well, he had a real sort of boogie swing to his play. Like, I mean, obviously he played off the guitar, but
Mm-hmm.
the thing, and that brown sound, that snare drum sound, it doesn't matter, man. You just know it's Alex, right?
Oh yeah, doesn't even sound like the snares are on
Right.
a lot of the time. He's got just that hollow sound, but yeah, it's real tight.
Yeah.
It's probably 8 inch deep. I don't know what he plays, but yeah, he's one of a kind, man. He's got that magic.
So every time I get an opportunity to talk to gentlemen or ladies such as yourself that kind of came through that day and that era, I always like to fire this question at them because again, channel 39 on my satellite radio rarely comes off. It's like that's what I grew up listening to. That's what influenced me. But then the 90s came, and we're rich, we're famous, and we hate life sort of happened. And I mean that's not to be too much of a jerk, but I mean it was just a different, darker kind of music, and that genre, the hair metal genre, or whatever you want to call it, kind of faded off. Now it seems like it's back just as much. If the Scorpions the other day, Matthias Jab said we're probably having just as much success as we did in the 80s. What do you attribute that to?
I think it always happens like that. It just comes around full circle. And like I said, the time that XYZ died out was when rap and grunge was coming in. Then I joined 7% Solution. It didn't last long because of that. And it took a long, long time. Sometimes it takes 20 years to come back full circle because a lot of different genres are hanging out and getting to the top of the charts. And there's no rhyme or reason for it. I just think that it just happens like that. There's another generation of kids and, they're not into the soft stuff. They're kind of like a harder generation of kids. So you got to give them that harder stuff. And, some of the shows that we recently played, there's some young kids that, hey, can I get a drumstick? I've been a big fan, and my buddy's throwing this party, and if you get me an extra, like, wow, man, like these kids are like 19, 20 years old, so the music today can relate to them. And it's just a good time. I agree. Everything just kind of came back full circle, and it's here now, and we'll see how long it lasts.
I have a friend that has a theory, and I kind of thought about it. And it's like, he could be onto something. I'll throw this out. You see what you think. He said that a lot of the kids now, their parents were listening. We're our age or a little bit older. That's what they were doing. So these kids were listening to that because their parents still liked it. Their parents still kept it as part of their lives. The kids got a hold of it. It's amazing how, I was at a festival this weekend and they played Round and Round by Rat, and all the young kids are like fist pumping. And I'm sitting there going, like, you guys were probably 15 to 20 years, like not even being born, and you're like, right?
Exactly.
But I think it's enduring music too, right? I mean, like, as much as you maybe want to, make fun of the way guys and girls look, there were some players back then, man, period.
Yeah, there were some great players. There's some great songs. A lot of things, went down. So it doesn't make, it makes perfectly sense that these parents that are our age are, teaching their kids like this was the shit, back in the day. This was the stuff right here. You got to listen to this. And some of them start them out really young. I see some young drummers online. They're like, 5 years old, 10 years old, and they're tearing it up because, who's videotaping? Rock and Roll Dad, man.
Yeah.
He's out there, supporting, and this is how these kids grow up. You're right.
Often when we're, obviously down in the States, like baseball and football are bigger, but up here we're big hockey people, and there's stories of, putting the kid on the ice at 2 and trying to be the next phenom. And I often wonder if that's what's going on with some of these kids, you know. Oh, I'm sorry, I got a light flashing here, but you see these kids that are 4 and 5 and 6 years old doing Tom Sawyer perfectly, and a little light show for you there, Paul.
Yeah, there you go. I love it.
Doing perfectly, to the song, and you kind of sit there and go, like, what the heck? You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. Some of those songs are very difficult to play, and it still challenges me. But Simon Phillips played the Sin After Sin album by Judas Priest when he was 19 years old. How good did he have to be when he was 15 or 16 to play it like that at 19 years old? But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Some of these kids, that's how they grew up. Their parents wanted to live through them and started them out really early. And you don't really know any better than what your parents teach you at that time. It makes sense.
100%. I might be having a little bit of an issue here, but you know what, Paul? We're going to power through it regardless.
You're good.
Question that I guess I want to ask you. So you get, and I apologize for this lighting situation. So you get back into it. Are you you've been doing some session work? I've been reading that maybe you've been playing with some people and that different type of thing. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I do some other stuff. I mean, besides the Judas Priest band, I fill in for a couple of Foreigner tribute bands. I do some recordings with, I have a recording studio set up, so I do some recordings for various artists. But Terry from XYZ has been asking me to do a lot more XYZ gigs.
Okay.
There's something going on with the drummer and the bass player that, they guess they don't want to tour anymore, or, whatever the story is. But we've been doing some gigs with George Lynch.
Oh, yes.
And, so that's been really cool. George Lynch and the band All or Nothing, who is also a bunch of young, really, really reminds me of the 7% Solution guys. Just really good looking kids, long hair, got the look, got the talent. And, between us and them and George, it's a really fun show.
And I guess, you mentioned the young kids or younger kids. How do you feel about, because I often, when I started playing the bars, 17 years old, the whippersnapper, and you see those heroes of yours that you aspire to be and stuff. And, I had a conversation with a guy that I grew up kind of idolizing back in the day. And he was like, man, when we saw your crew come in, we were fearful that like our scene that we built was just going to be tracked, because we were a bunch of yahoos. Like, let's call it what it is, right? Do you feel that the next wave of what you're seeing is going to be, good enough to keep what you built going?
That's a great question. I'm flattered by what you said, because I don't feel like we really built anything. We're just kind of tagging along with what everyone else was doing. But the new guys coming up, there's a lot of talent, and when we were signed Sean, I mean, the only way that people knew about us is, or any other musicians, if you had a record deal,
Right.
you know, and you're on MTV, and you're somewhere on a TV or in a magazine, and usually you get that kind of recognition from having a record deal, which is what we had. But now you don't need that. It's the least important thing if you want to, be successful. So as long as you're on some sort of social media, YouTube or Facebook or TikTok, and you're promoting yourself that way, there's so much more talent that we didn't know about back in the day that now everybody's coming out of the woodworks, and it's just mind blowing sometimes. So I think, it has advantages and disadvantages, but I think there's more opportunity now for the younger peeps.
Last question I have for you. I want to be respectful of your time. I had the opportunity to not only talk with drummers, but guitar players, bass players, different sorts of people, and people that I have been talking to just about getting gigs and networking aspect of things, and going out there and meeting people and putting yourself in the line to get work and recording and whatever. The common theory or the common theme is don't be a headache. Be the person everybody wants to have. Be the person that everybody calls first. And I want to get your slant on that, because obviously if you're an amazing player in an A-hole, it may or may not work out for you. But there's some, great players that wouldn't be considered virtuosos that get an awful lot of work because they're easy to deal with. I want to get your slant on that, Paul.
Yeah, that's a good question too. And yeah, you have to be humble, and people could see right through it if you're not, because you're going to be who you are. But if you appreciate and you have a lot of gratitude for the work that you get, you actually just become naturally humble. If you take it for granted and you treat people wrong, then karma will get you, and you'll probably expect some bad things to happen. You're just not going to get the work. For me, I get along with everybody. I try to be real easy. They make the calls. I'm the hired gun sometimes. So I try to make it easy. And then this guy gives your number to someone else. Hey, this is Paul's number. He's really easy to work with. And then he gives my number to two other people. Next thing you know, you get a whole bunch of work, and you get to choose, who you want to work for. And my schedule is pretty full. So I have to turn down stuff a lot of times, but I am grateful for the fact that, I never give anybody a problem. Put the ego to the side if you have it, and just really be more grateful for the work that's coming, and develop those relationships, hand those business cards out and develop those relationships, and good things will come your way.
Yeah. And I mean, having a full schedule is a nice problem to have. And I mean, sometimes, you would know this, that, obviously being a musician, you're not the 9 to 5 or things happen. You might not play or do anything for a week, and then all of a sudden you're out till the wee hours, or you're working on Saturdays and Sundays, and it's not for everybody, and everybody doesn't get it. But having a full schedule is a nice problem to have.
Yeah, and before you get to that point, just be ready.
Right.
Because if you have that attitude, I'll practice more next week, and then you get that call. You never know when that call is going to come, but you're going to earn it, and the universe will give it to you. If you attract it, it'll come to you, and you'll have it. But you have to be ready. Make sure you're ready, and you will know. You can't fool yourself. You get to that point. You know what? If that phone call comes today, I'm ready. Just get to that point, and then the rest will kind of flow into place.
Sir, I want to thank you for doing this. And I have a little saying. I've had the good fortune of meeting some people over the last 2 years that we started this podcast. And oddly enough, one of the biggest pains in the ass that I dealt with was in my own backyard. Everybody that I grew up listening to that I've had the fortune to chat with has been great. No crap. I'm not saying this just because you're on here. You've been one of my favorite drummers for a very, very long time. I think you're creative. I think the things that I've heard you play on have just been some of my favorite things. I've stole a lot of them. It's out there or whatever. But I want to thank you for doing this. It's so nice to meet you. And I always say it's great when your heroes aren't dicks, and you're certainly a very nice person, bud. And I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate you, man.
All right, my friend. We'll chat soon.
Okay. Sounds good.